Well, winter's not done with us yet. A little bit of weather out this morning, but I learned my lesson from the last time not to call a meeting too early. Dolan?
Thank you, Worship. I am at 11 o'clock.
I will look for our attendance.
Thank you, Your Worship. Starting from the top, looking for those in attendance. Councillor Anderson. Present. Councillor Bell.
Present.
Councillor Burkett. Present. Councillor Cabral. Present. Warden Clark.
Present.
Present. Councillor Compton. Present. Deputy Warden Coughlin.
Present.
Councillor Cox. Present. Councillor Dolan.
Present.
Councillor Evans. Present. Councillor Fowler. Present. Councillor Fryer. Present. Councillor Gordon. Present. Councillor Greenlaw.
Present.
Councillor Hamlin. Present. Councillor Laux. Present. Councillor LaRose. Present. Councillor Lavoie.
Present.
Councillor Leduc. Present. Councillor McDonald. Present. Councillor McClellan.
Present.
Councillor Measures.
Present.
Councillor Miskimins.
Present.
Councillor Norcross.
Present.
Councillor Norris.
Present.
Councillor Rawson.
Present.
Councillor Sandu.
Present.
Councillor Brian Smith.
Present.
Councillor Michael Smith is absent and sent his regrets. In his place, alternate Councillor Sander.
Present.
Councillor Snell. Present. Councillor Van Staveren.
Present.
Councillor Walker.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So I'll turn to Councillor Dolan for approval of the agenda.
Thank you. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McClellan that the agenda for the March 14th, 2023 meeting of Council be approved.
Questions on the agenda? All in favor? That is carried. Do I have a disclosure of pecuniary interest by any member of Council? None at this time. Perfect. If you find yourself in that situation later, please put up your hand. Presentations and deputations, we have none, so I'd call on Councillor Burkett for the consent agenda.
Good morning, Your Worship. Through you, moved by myself, second by Councillor Anderson, that the Council communications and proclamations February the 28th, 2023 to March 13th, 2023 have been given due consideration be received.
Everybody's heard the motions. Any questions on the consent? All in favor? That is carried. The adoption of the minutes, Deputy Warden.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Laux that the Council minutes be confirmed and adopted and the Committee of the Whole report be confirmed. County Council minutes February 28th, 2023 and Committee of the Whole report February 28th, 2023.
Any questions on the minutes? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So I guess we're already on to the presentations and considerations of the Committee of the Whole. So Chairman Cox for performance.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Fowler, that the performance management recommendations contained within the Committee of the Whole report dated February 28th, 2023 be approved. All in favor?
Any items to be pulled? No. All right.
Oh, sorry.
Carried. That's all right. Chairman Leduc.
Yes, thank you, Warden. And moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Van Staveren, that the Human Resources recommendation contained within the Committee of Whole report dated February 28, 2023 be approved. Anyone want to pull any issues? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chairman Dolan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Measures that the corporate services recommendations contained within the Committee of the Whole report dated February 28th, 2023 be approved.
Any items to be pulled? All in favor? That is carried. So I guess presentations and considerations of special committee reports we have none. County officers report we have none, and notices of motion I don't have any. Do I have any notice of motions to be presented today? Don't recall getting any. So I'll look for a mover and a seconder to go into Committee of the Whole. Moved by Councillor Miskimins, second by Councillor Smith. Brian Smith. All in favor? That is carried. So we would look for our city reps to join us now, and then we'll do a quick roll call. Thank you, Doug. Yep.
Thank you, Your Worship. Doing a roll call of the city representatives, beginning with Aurelia Councillor Durnford. I did receive regrets. Aurelia Councillor Fallis.
Here.
Thank you. Barrie Councillor Hamilton. A note is absent. Aurelia Mayor McIsaac.
Here.
Thank you. Barrie Councillor Nagusi. A note is absent. Barrie Mayor Nuttall. A note is absent. And Barrie Councillor Riatma.
Here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Dolan, if you could bring the motion to approve our agenda.
Thank you, Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Fryer. That the agenda for March 14th, 2023 meeting of Committee of the Whole be approved.
Questions on the meeting minutes or agenda? All in favor? That is carried. Now, do I have a disclosure of pecuniary interest by anybody on the Committee of the Whole? Not seeing any. Perfect. Presentations and delegations. Again, I don't think we have any, do we, at this point? So we will turn over to Human Services with Chairman Leduc.
Thank you, Warden. So we're on Section 19.1, Human Services Land Ambulance, and it's CCW 2023-74, Primary Data Sharing and Services Agreement. I'm moving a second to put this on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor Fowler. Questions or concerns with this report? It's a good report. It's a data sharing report. Councillor Fowler? A question?
Actually, no, it's okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, seeing no further questions, that item CCW 2023-074 dated March 14, 2023 regarding the primary data sharing and services agreement be received and the necessary bylaw be presented to authorize the warden and county clerk to enter into a primary data sharing and services agreement with the Ministry of Health and its partners under the Ambulance Act, substantially in the form attached as Schedule 1 to the subject item. All in favor? Thank you. Carried. On to 19.2, CCW 2023-085, Dedicated Offload Nursing Program Funding. Moving a second for this, please. Moved by Councillor Sandu, seconded by Deputy Warden Coughlin. Question concerns with this, again, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I read through the report, I note, as I have many times in past in this House, with respect to our larger cities and the hospital offload times, as they tend to be the worst in the county. And I see that we're now allocating more funds, of which a good portion is going to these two larger hospitals. The issue I have here, quite frankly, and I've shared this before, is that we have two large hospitals that are obviously very busy. They're provincially funded hospitals, so I'm not so sure that this is the responsibility of the county at any rate. But we also have many other hospitals in the county with the other 16 municipalities that are also struggling a great deal with staffing issues and specifically offload times. And when we look at the response times, which we'll get to in the next section here, we see that response times in these hospitals is still near the top, if not at the top of the worst in the county. So my concern here is that we've got 16 other municipalities in this county who are continuously paying through DC, so on and so forth, to the county, yet the folks in our communities are faced with slower ambulance times, which we know that is often because of very slow offload times. And we often see our ambulances from our municipalities that are tied up in the larger cities. And I'm not just speaking of Barrie or Aurelia. I had a situation 2 weeks ago where a citizen called an ambulance, took 31 minutes, and it's because the 2 ambulances out of Wasaga Beach were actually tied up, one in Newmarket and one in Toronto, because they were transporting patients and they couldn't get out. So I'd really like to see something come forward in the near future, that specifically speaks to where we're at with offload times today with our hospitals. And I really think we should be looking deeper into this to make sure that the citizens of Simcoe County and our other 16 municipalities are not being shortchanged with not getting the proper service they require. And again, it comes down to offload times often is the case. We know that ambulances can sit up to 3 hours in a hospital. And in Barrie, I'm not so sure about Aurelia, but in Barrie, that is a case that happens often enough. Those are my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for those comments. Would the General Manager like to reply? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The comments about offload delay are very well received. It is a priority for us at the county, and not just with the 2 hospitals that we are recommending to fund the nurse offload program for the next year, but across all of our hospitals. It has been a priority topic in our meetings this past year with the CEOs and presidents of each of the hospitals. They have made it a priority to work with us around process improvement, noting that it does delay our paramedic crews from responding to additional emergencies when they are in offload for extended periods of time. At this point in time, we have recommended the additional offload funding to the Royal Victoria Regional Health Centre and Aurelia Soldiers Memorial Hospital, as they have approximately 41% of the calls that we are responding to. And so we have, in the short term, have prioritized these 2 particular hospitals. However, we will continue to evaluate the effectiveness of the new funding, and we have engaged a provincial facilitator to work with all of our area hospitals as well as paramedic services to look at for process improvements in the emergency department. So we will continue to provide County Council with updates as we go forward with the new funding and as we go forward with this facilitator aimed at improving processes in all of the area hospitals. And I will note for many of our new county councillors, County Council did put in place a specific memorandum of understanding with all of our area hospitals a number of years ago regarding offload delay times. And the memorandum of understanding requires each of the hospitals to meet a target of 30 minutes offload time. That's an accepted standard across the province. While this has been put on pause for the last couple of years during the pandemic, it has resumed. So for hospitals not meeting those metrics, they will actually have their capital funding reduced accordingly. Staff have determined, working with our finance staff, a cost per hour. And based on that, there's a calculation for the additional time over that standard where they will actually be reduced in their annual capital funding. So we have reinitiated that and have made this certainly a priority to work with the hospitals, all area hospitals. Appreciate those comments.
Thank you, General Manager, for that follow-up. So I have Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a supplemental, and I appreciate, Jane, your response, and I know that we all have the utmost respect for you and your team here, and you do the best you can. But I do recall this funding when it started back in 13-14, and we had a lot of conversation about this. But it's interesting to hear that we believe that still today RVH and Soldiers Memorial are the priority. And if you look at the chart actually within the report, we can see that RVH has been the priority since 13. I think the first 4 years it was the only hospital to receive any funding on this. So again, I just think it's important to make clear, and I hope the rest of my colleagues here are really looking at this and considering it, that we have several other hospitals in the county, in municipalities that are part of the county and are putting the large sums of money into the coffers, and I think that those hospitals should be receiving some more attention. Thank you very much.
Councillor Follis. Mayor McKaysey, can I have you turn your microphone off, please? Thank you.
Thanks. Through the chair, and I did appreciate Councillor Smith's comments there. I was just curious if it might be possible for staff to provide a bit of an overview of the program, some of the specifics of what it entails. Thanks.
General Manager.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. The offload delay funding is dedicated funding for the hospital to put in place a nurse in the emergency department that will help with the flow of patients upon arrival of paramedic services. In the past, we have dedicated the funding towards the Royal Victoria Regional Health Centre. And the Royal Victoria Regional Health Centre, that's a mouthful, they have actually topped up the funding. So we've been receiving about $131,000 for about the last 10 years. And they have matched that to invest so they could have an RN 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for that continuity of service to help with the offload delay. And so this funding is a flow through to the hospital for the hospitals to staff accordingly. I will note there will be changes in how we allocate and flow the funding with this additional funding, such that we will be requiring the hospitals to confirm the actual staffing has occurred. Hospitals, like every other healthcare provider in the province, have been under tremendous staffing challenges with shortages, and so we haven't seen necessarily continuous staffing because of shortages. So we are actually putting in place a new process to confirm that the actual staffing has been in place before the funding will flow. So we will continue to provide updates to Council as this new funding rolls out. And I will note, if I may, Chair, it's not mentioned in the report. However, our finance team have been in discussion with the province, and though we do not have it in writing, we have it via email. This amount of funding will continue for the provincial next fiscal year, so we were very pleased to confirm that this will be something into the future.
Thank you. Thank you, General Manager. Any further comments or questions? So seeing none, I'll read the recommendation. That's that item CCW 2023-085 dated March 14, 2023 regarding an update on the Ministry of Health funding of the County of Simcoe Paramedic Services Dedicated Offload Nurse Program for 2022-23 be received, and that subject to continued funding in 2023-24, that increased funding in support of the Dedicated Offload Nurse Program be utilized as generally outlined in item CCW 2023-85. All in favor? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We're on to 19.3, the County of Simcoe Paramedic Service Deployment and Response Time Performance Plan Update. Mover second to put this on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Bell, second by Councillor McDonald. Questions or concerns with this one? Councillor Fryer.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to General Manager Sinclair. Table 1 on page 86 of the agenda is anticipated response time improvement from the recommended changes. Noting the substantial change for Collingwood, the beneficial change relative to the average, I just wondered if there was any concern with response time in regards to what had been previously going on and what will be anticipated to happen with this improvement.
General Manager Sinclair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The recommendations for the four allocations in this deployment plan are based on increases in call volume and ongoing assessments of response time. In the Collingwood area in particular, it is an area that we've noted an increase in calls. And so we have what's called, it's a modeling tool where we put inputs into the tool, population, call volumes, projected increases in population, demographics, a number of different variables. And it also includes the locations of our stations across the entire region. And so our recommendations for Collingwood in this case would be based on trending that we've observed and anticipate in future in terms of increased call volume. And so in this particular case, extending another 12-hour ambulance, we project that it will be able to meet the increasing trends in call volume that we've been seeing. Does that help clarify? Or?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, General Manager.
Thank you. Further comments or questions on this one? I have Councillor Follis.
Thanks. Through the chair, just a couple of questions. One was on page 2 of the report. There's mention of increased fatigue, burnout amongst staff, and ... There's a couple of other things mentioned there. I'm curious what are some of the what are some things that we're looking at doing to try to mitigate that? Are there any mental health supports that we're offering? Are we looking at offering more time off? If staff could speak to that, that'd be greatly appreciated. The other question I had was just on page 17, so it's 404 of the package, and it was interesting. It's under priority posting plans, and I was just curious. There's mention of carpool a couple of times, and I'm just curious what that was. I couldn't really understand. I couldn't find a definition, so just wondering if staff could speak to that. Thanks.
Thank you. General Manager Sinclair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll provide some response, but I will direct for more detailed response from our Director-in-Chief, Mills. The first question around wellness of staff, this has been certainly a priority area. Paramedic services has certainly experienced some shortages and retention and recruitment issues, really to the extent that I've not seen in my tenure over the last 20 plus years. The pandemic has really impacted healthcare services across the board in all sectors. So wellness support for our staff has been a priority focus. We work very closely with our human resources team around some additional wellness supports. We have what's called a peer support program as well, and I will get our Director-in-Chief to comment on that. But we have been looking at other components such as schedules, and really trying to engage staff. We did a staff survey last summer, and of 420 staff, we received approximately 411 responses. It was a 98% response rate. So our staff were very eager to provide input into to our leadership team in terms of what their priorities are and how we can work more closely with them. So with that, I'll ask Director-in-Chief Mills to comment on wellness and then touch on your second question around carpooling. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. The wellness, when you talk about the wellness initiatives for our staff and the burnout, we do have a number of things that we're doing. GM Sinclair has touched on our peer support team, which is exactly that. It is when our staff are having, when they come across an unusual circumstance or a bad call, we do have a team of their peers that they trust, and they know that has had training through TEMA Contour. I don't know. It was a center developed quite a while ago for mental health support. So we have training given through that so that these people can engage their peers. So it's not, someone brought in from the outside that they're not familiar with. From there, if they do need more support, we have the EAP, the route they can go through EAP and provide them with actual like psychotherapy, counseling, that type of thing. It gets them in touch. We actually, as a team too, keep a really close eye on it. We get reports on who's been involved in some of these calls, and we make sure that we keep on top of them. The day-to-day burnout and fatigue that we're talking about is with increased call volume. It's HHR issues. It's what we've seen in healthcare across the board since the pandemic. So we do have to be mindful of how hard we're running our staff and really making sure that we have the appropriate supports in place, and we really, really keep an eye on the deployment plan, and we put through recommendations like this so that we can relieve some of that burden and some of that stress for them, because they are running really hard and they have had a tough couple of years through the pandemic. So, and then to the carpool lane, you've pointed it out for me. I will add it to the deployment plan. The definition for that is when we have depleting resources. So when we get down to only so many ambulances available in the entire county, they go to midway points so that they are easily able to cover bigger geographical areas. And so the carpool is exactly that. It's the carpool lot. Now, we know that internally, so it's a really good idea. We'll add that in as a definition, and the locations for those of you that are reading it that won't necessarily know what that means. So thank you. I will make sure that's added.
I'm glad you clarified that, Councillor Falls, because I had a similar question. I thought it was that. Sounded like something like that. So I have Councillor Smith next, and then I have Councillor Bell after.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Jane. I just a comment, I guess, and a concern. And let me start by saying the one thing I can tell you: if you drive around the county, you see fire departments with apparatuses in the halls are full and they're sitting there. Police departments with parking lots full of cruisers, but you very rarely see an ambulance bay with an ambulance in it. So I completely understand what the manager is saying with respect to burnout and the amount of calls that they're doing. But I'll touch on this one the same as I did the last. We're going to add more ambulances to Southbury, Bradford, West Gwillimbury, and I have no issue with Bradford, West Gwillimbury, Mr. Chair. They're part of the county, and the coffers are coming here constantly. But here we are again adding more ambulances to the Barrie area. Of which case I would say that unless something has changed, I think Barrie still enjoys and reaps the benefits of the best response times for ambulances in the county by far. And we have communities that are waiting average 10 to 15 minutes, double to triple what you would in the city of Barrie or more. So I really struggle once again with the other 16 municipalities in this county. I don't know any other way to say it, but subsidizing the large city with respect to paramedic services, garbage, social housing, affordable housing, social services in general. That's how I feel about it, and I think it's a conversation that needs to be had sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, and I'll ask General Manager Sinclair to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may, I'll just speak to the seamless principle, because it gets very complex in terms of the movement and our deployment plan. So there is something called the seamless principle in paramedic services, and that requires the closest ambulance to respond to the call. It's not dictated by paramedic services or the county. It's managed by the dispatch, ambulance dispatch. It's called George and CAC, our particular ambulance dispatch, which is owned and operated by the province. And so this is where the complexity gets into place. Actually placing the one rapid response unit, the 12-hour unit in the city of Barrie, an ACP unit, Advanced Care Paramedic Unit, sorry for the acronyms, and increasing to a 12-hour ambulance in Alcona, which is in the municipality of Innisfil, actually benefits ESSA more than those two municipalities, because what happens is literally when there's a call, and because there's a large call volume in the Barrie area in particular, and Innisfil is a growing population, if there isn't an ambulance available within those municipalities, Dispatch doesn't care about boundaries. They will literally pull the closest ambulance. And ESSA Township, because of proximity, that ambulance gets pulled into either Barrie or Innisfil because it has transport capabilities. And so if you look at the chart, so where it gets very complex, ESSA is actually the net gain on this. It's between 2.5% and 3% increase is our estimation for those performance metrics because of the resources we're recommending for Barrie and Innisfil. Certainly Barrie and Innisfil are increasing as well. There's a benefit there as well. In fact, I think there's a benefit to approximately 10 municipalities with the 4 recommendations because of the seamless principle, and putting resources in place will actually prevent pulling resources from neighboring municipalities. So in this case, ESSA is actually the net benefactor for those resources. And when we did our budget presentations last year, we talked about the concerns, the priorities of ESSA and Collingwood. And so these recommendations are actually to address the areas that are getting pulled. So I hope that helps clarify those particular resources.
Yes, thank you. And Councillor Smith, you did hit on the head. We seldom have any ambulance bays with ambulances in them. So I thank our paramedics for the service they provided over this last couple of years. It's been stressful for them. So I've got Councillor Bell and I've got Councillor McDonald next.
Great, thank you. My comments are actually are on the report on page 3 and 4. For our township, Ramera Township and Tiny, you're showing a negative improvement, and that's a concern for me. So can you maybe elaborate on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It does show a very slight, I think, 0.1 decrease. And with our deployment plan, which in terms of response time would be considered negligible, we certainly would not like any negative impact, but it is very, very slight. And when we're making recommendations for resources, additional resources, we're trying to get the largest gain on a regional basis. And with those 4 recommendations, the net impact, as I mentioned, it was the largest for us in terms of putting where we could potentially direct our resources. I will say that the challenge that we have is, as I mentioned, that seamless principle. Ambulances are continuously getting pulled to where the calls are. So, for example, in Ramera, we put a targeted response unit. We call it a targeted response unit. It's a rapid response unit, so an SUV versus an ambulance. So it doesn't have transport capability, but it's fully staffed with a paramedic. And we've done that probably for about the last 10 years. We've started to put what we call targeted rapid response units in place because they can't get pulled. They're not part of that seamless principle because they don't have that transport capability, so they're outside that deployment piece through dispatch. And so with Ramera, a perfect example, we've actually dedicated a rapid response unit because it's staffed with a fully fledged paramedic to ensure that there is a paramedic there and is not going to be pulled, to neighboring municipalities because that's where the calls go. So we do look at where there's large geography, smaller population, and less calls. We've started to adapt that model to ensure that there is paramedic response in those municipalities. There are other similar municipalities across the region that have larger geography, smaller population, and smaller calls. And so for us to put an ambulance in those municipalities, we know they will get pulled. they will constantly get pulled to where the calls are through the dispatch system. So we continue to look at that. Ramera, as I mentioned, there are other municipalities with very similar population and geographies that we know are a challenge because of that draw. So we continue to look at those options around rapid response units so that we can ensure there's a paramedic response within the geography.
Thank you. Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Chair. It's more of a comment because Us's name came up a couple of times. We do have a paramedic station right in Angus, and our residents always think, where are they? But we are so, as a council and our residents are so pleased that we don't have boundaries, because the whole thing about paramedics is how can we get there, how can we do it fast, and how can we save a life? And if we had boundaries, ours would just stay stationary in there, and each one would be there. And then you would have paramedics or your vehicles sitting there. But the way that it's laid out is the only way that it's going to work. And so we're very, very thankful for how it does work. Thank you.
Yes, great point, Councillor McDonald. Councillor Van Straven.
Just a quick question for explanation. When you start talking about the rapid response units, if you pull an ambulance from an area, do you automatically replace it with a rapid response unit?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's a great question. That does happen. It's called standby. So that the dispatch are the ones that are dictating which response units go to specific calls. And they are constantly moving resources, constantly. So as soon as one ambulance is pulled to a call, dispatch is pulling other either rapid response units, well, it wouldn't be rapid response units, but it would be other ambulances, adjusting them in what's called standby. Again, they have a map, and they're constantly looking at the best response time. So that is a great question. I know we talked about doing a presentation at some point, just an orientation about paramedic services, and that will be part of our presentation to council, is to actually demonstrate or show the constant movements that happen, because it is such a complex process in terms of the vehicles being deployed and then moving other vehicles in place to try and maximize the response time. And the dispatchers focus on call volume areas. They know typically where the largest extent of calls occur, so they're constantly moving vehicles around.
Just one further question in regards to that, because I see the rapid response units around our community. I think it's something that has a great, especially for the smaller communities, something of importance for the future as opposed to running the ambulances. We do have a lot of issues that do not need ambulances, and I think it's something that we may have to refocus some of our ideas on, especially when we heard our comments up in regards to like Tiny Township or Ramera. Maybe we got to rethink things a bit. Thank you.
General Manager would like to make comments?
I'll be short. Again, appreciate that comment very much. One of the things that we've been talking to County Council about is this new models of care opportunity. The Ambulance Act changed a couple of years ago. We just we'll be bringing a report forward, approval of a new model of care for hospice, which means if we respond to a particular call, we won't necessarily transport that individual to hospital. There are other options now where we can treat and release, treat and refer, or treat and transfer to an alternate destination. So to your point, that is going to be a significant priority for us to look at what options are available going forward into the future. Thank you for that comment.
Thank you. Okay, further comments. I have Councillor Follis.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I wanted to really express my support, especially for some of the rural municipalities, for what's sounding like a need for more resources and improved response time. And I do want to really, I guess, put it out to staff and to everyone that will never be blamed for improving response time or resources for ambulances. So if there's budget requirements or further asks, I really wanted to stress that I think that's something we should explore if we can significantly address some of the issues that have been mentioned. Thanks.
And thank you for the comments, GM Sinclair. Would you like to respond?
we'll continue certainly to monitor and provide updates to County Council on a regular basis.
Yes, thank you. And I think we added 6 paramedics in this budget this year, so we're always looking at that, trying to improve. And I thank Jane and her team and Chief Mills for what they have done to provide this service for our residents of Simcoe County. So, seeing no further comments or questions, I will read the recommendation that item CCW 2023-86 dated March 14, 2023, regarding the paramedic services deployment and response time performance plan update for 2023 be received, and that subject to deliberations in the affirmative, that changes to the paramedic services deployment plan as outlined within item CCW 2023-86 be approved, and that the paramedic service deployment plan be forwarded to the Georgian Central Ambulance Communications Center for implementation. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We're moving on to section 20, Long-Term Care Committee of Management. I have CCW 2023-070, Long-Term Care Quality Improvement Plan, 2023-24. I need to move in a second, please. Moved by Councillor Leitch and seconded by Councillor Coghlan, Deputy Warden Coghlan, I'm sorry. Questions or concerns with this report? Councillor Fryer.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to General Manager Sinclair. I don't have any concerns at all with the QUIP narratives on the homes, but I was hoping it was okay to ask at this time for an update on Sunset Manor from the transition over the last few months. I recall in our conversations when we were going through the difficulties, one of the challenges was going to be staffing as much as bringing the new residents in. So I just was hoping to get an update on how that's been progressing.
General Manager Sinclair.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. I'm very pleased to say that things are going very well at Sunset Manor. Today will mark the 17th admission since the CCW admissions has been lifted. The staff are working very hard. We did put in place an admission team, dedicated individuals, including registered staff, social worker, our nurse practitioner, physician support, etc. And they're working very well together around admissions, and we've received tremendous support from our new residents and their families. We do have a regular meeting coming up tomorrow, in fact, with the province, but we have been providing regular updates during the opening and readmission process, and so things are going very well at this time.
Just as a follow-up, if I may, once again, just want to thank General Manager Sinclair and General Manager Wilcox for their work in this very difficult time, and I'm really pleased to hear that it's transitioning over very well. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you for those comments. And I apologize for the mispronunciation of your names, Councillor Locke. I truly apologize about everything. So I'll get better as we move through the system, and I get to call your names more often. Any further comments or questions on this? Seeing none, I will read the recommendation that item CCW 2023-70, dated March 14, 2023, regarding long-term care quality improvement plans 2023-24 be received, and that the warden and county clerk sign the County of Simcoe's long-term care quality improvement plans substantially in the schedules attached to items 2023-70. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Moving to 21, other matters of consideration. Seeing none, Warden, I turn it back to you.
Thank you, Chairman Leduc, and I want to thank the Aurelia and the Barrie councillors for joining us. All right. How do they say? You're free to go. With that, I will turn the meeting over to Chairman Dolan.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we're on item 22, which is corporate services consent. We have one item on the consent list today, which is the County Road 53 and Carson Road, Seaton Road roundabout construction project update. Is there any comments or questions on that item? Seeing none, then could I ask for a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Deputy Warden Coghlan, seconded by Councillor Sandu, that the following consent item, having been given due consideration, be received. All those in favor? Those opposed? That is carried. Then we'll move on to item 23, 23.1, which is the request for approval of the Town of Bradford, West Gwillimbury's official plan. comments or questions on BWG's official plan? Councillor Leduc.
Maybe just a comment, and it's nice to see our official plan come through County Council now, and we look forward to the approval of it and moving forward this official plan. It's been a few years in the works, but we're glad to see it here now. Thank you very much, General Manager Elliott, for getting this done.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll have that moved by Councillor Leduc and seconded by Councillor Walker, that the Town of Bradford West Gwillimbury official plan is adopted by the Town of Bradford West Gwillimbury bylaw 2021-17 and modified as per Schedule 3 to item CCW 2023-038 dated March 14, 2023 be approved, and that notice of decision of the official plan approval for the Town of Bradford West Gwillimbury be approved in accordance with the Planning Act, and that a non-decision be placed on the lands located at 3999 Side Road 10, County Road 54, and north of part of Lot 11, Concession 11, being part of Part 1 on Plan 51R-26166, and the Town of Bradford West Gwillimbury as generally identified on Schedule B of the Town of Bradford West Gwillimbury's official plan and Schedule 3 to item CCW 2023-038. Don't make me say that again. All those in favor? Any contrary? That is carried. Any other items for consideration for corporate services? Seeing none, I will pass it over to you, Warden Clark.
Thank you, Councillor. And now if Chairman Cox could do performance management.
Good morning. 25, performance management. 25.1, it's municipal procurement presentation by Don Hipwell, Director of the Procurement, Fleet and Property, and Catherine Payne, Manager of the Procurement and Sustainable Operations, and Sahara Wolpole, Director of Legal Services. If they would come down. Thank you.
Make sure you can hear me okay. Thank you for having us this morning. We're going to cover a broad overview of municipal procurement. And I'm just going to set the slides up. Catherine, Zara, and I are going to split the information up over the course of the presentation. I will cover the overview piece. Catherine will get into some details on process, and then Zara will finish up with just best practices in procurement. To start, why is the public procurement process important? Many reasons. The main ones here, of course, we're safeguarding public funds. We're not only safeguarding them within the procurement process and the awards of contracts, but we are wanting to perform the process in the most efficient and effective manner. We also want to inspire confidence in the process, both from the public perspective and the supplier perspective. When people are confident, they bid. There's always a risk of litigation in the procurement process, so we need to be very careful and cautious that we're following all the rules. And of course, with increased competition comes savings for the public. There's a note here just to highlight that the county spends over $200 million annually on the procurement of goods, services, construction, and lease space, with over 200 RFX processes issued annually. And since we put the procurement policy in place in 2002, we've had no formal litigation launched against the county. In terms of the procurement staff activities, we have several staff in procurement. They focus on consolidating and leveraging the corporation's procurement volume, constantly are sourcing goods and services, preparing and issuing bid documents, and performing bid analysis to make sure we're getting best value. We also provide procurement support for our member municipalities, and we provide system training and orientation to new staff. Contract admin and legal challenges are handled in the department, along with continuous improvement on procurement processes and policy. You will see the procurement policy come to you. through the Finance Committee, typically every 3 years. Risk management, we manage through performance sureties, WSIB. We always have to make sure WSIB is in place with our vendors, and we make sure insurance is covered. And we are moving into social and sustainable procurement over the last few years. This is just a slide that graphically depicts the work that's happening in public procurement. The other piece I'll just mention is crisis management, because we do provide support, of course, in the pandemic, and when there's tornadoes or power outage, we're there to support staff. This is a slide that just outlines some of the statistics. Again, the $200 million annually. We have 30 plus internal customers, over 5,000 vendors in our system. 6,000 registered bidders on our bids and tenders electronic bidding platform, and we issue over 6,000 purchase orders a year. This is an overview of the oversight mechanisms that we must abide by within our process. And as you can see, there are quite a few. We have our own procurement policy, and there is administrative law, common law. The broader public sector procurement directive is the province's procurement policy. The Competition Act, we must also be mindful of. Trade agreements are complex and ever-changing, and Zara will speak more about the Bellamy report later. The Discriminatory Business Practices Act is also something we monitor. Within the trade agreements and some of this legislation, we have guidelines that we follow, and these rules are kind of the default rules that we must follow in our processes. So notices of procurement and content must be free of charge. We use a website. Where the bids are published must be online. There are time periods for publication of opportunities that we must follow. Supplier pre-qual processes are there. We use them. And there's a minimum amount of information that we must contain for each procurement that we post to ensure that all bidders are informed fairly. Also within these guidelines are rules about when negotiations can occur, when sole sourcing is allowed, and the handling of submitted bids. Also disclosure of information and dispute resolution steps if a dispute arises. So the point is that it's really all framed within rules that we must follow. And of course, the Municipal Act, Part 6, Section 270, that is the section that requires the county and all municipalities to have a procurement process and policy which we follow. So the county's procurement policy covers a broad range of topics. It not only covers the acquisition of goods and services and our tangible assets and equipment, but we also have within that document the inventory management of assets and equipment, disposal of our surplus donated and scrap assets, and the use of purchasing cards in the corporation. As well, there are the professional ethics of 3 procurement associations within it. It outlines our signing authority as a corporation, our management signing authority, and the positions that are authorized to procure goods and services at the county. As well, there are emergency purchases that arise, and that's very clearly defined in the policy and how that must be handled. As well in the policy, for the benefit of staff who use the policy, we define the budgetary process. We describe it so that everyone understands what needs to occur in advance of a procurement and where the funds come from and how you approve those funds. There are definitions of key procurement terms, the rules of what to do in the event there is a tie bid. We explain the contract execution process, PO process, and the receiving and payment process that occurs. As well, non-competitive and negotiated procurement, which does occur, is outlined in the policy and how that works. Also prohibitions, which is what not to do. The key goals in the policy, effectiveness, objectivity, openness and transparency, accountability, efficiency, and fairness are all defined. And the last one is consideration for the environment. And I'll hand it over now to Catherine, who's going to get into a little more detail.
Thanks, Dawn. Public procurement involves a variety of steps First of that begins with the recognition of the need, followed by approval to council, selecting of the procurement process, advertising, bid submission, approval of the purchase, contract review and execution, receiving and payment of goods and services. Each year we identify our operational and capital expenditures for the coming year. Estimates are obtained to assist with budget planning. Budgets are reviewed and provided to council for your consideration. And approval of the annual budget by county council authorizes procurement staff to proceed with those acquisitions. There's a variety of processes that we utilize to procure goods and services. Some of those are low and repetitive and therefore are purchased on a P-card or a Visa. Request for quote, which is a low value. Request for tender, which is a price-specific process. Request for proposal, and occasionally a direct award. The RFT and RFP are the two primary documents that we use, and they have their differences. A request for tender is when we know exactly what it is that we're looking for, and it can be defined under some sort of specification. Bidders can ask questions about the opportunity once it's posted. All bidders are pricing and supplying the exact same thing, and they submit their price on that. Pricing is the only criteria in that situation, and the values of all tender submissions are posted on our website, and the award is based on the lowest price and identified on our website as well. The RFP is a little more complex. It's a situation where we do not have a specification. Sometimes it's a situation where we'll define the end result and ask a bidder or a proponent to define how we get there. Those folks can also ask questions or clarifications. Proponents define the good that they're proposing and how the service would be provided. There's an evaluation criteria. It could include things such as their approach, their methodology, their experience, their qualifications, along with price. They submit their best proposal. The names of all the proponents are posted on our website. However, we don't post the pricing. Award is based on the highest score as opposed to the lowest price, and that's the highest scoring of the evaluation criteria. The evaluation process can be a little bit lengthy sometimes. We do use a mix of evaluators. We often try and include a fresh set of eyes. So if we're evaluating some sort of a waste contract, we might have our folks from finance, we might include someone from customer service. That helps us flesh out some of those assumptions that perhaps some people who are too familiar might have. They're facilitated by our procurement team. There's a declaration of no conflict of interest prior to that meeting. We ensure consistency in the scoring. We use a scoring guideline. And if we use a guideline, it is finalized prior to the evaluation to ensure there's fairness to all bidders. And the evaluation criteria are posted. They're in the RFP documents. They're determined prior to issuance, and they have a weight, and they can be very detailed. There are times when we will negotiate with some bidders. It may be a situation where we may be slightly over budget and think we may have some opportunity to find some additional savings. That doesn't occur very often. But when there's a tie score, when we have a proposal, particularly in that area, where we find that we have two bidders who may be slightly deficient in certain areas, we can proceed to what's called a best and final offer process, where we identify their shortcomings and allow them an opportunity to resubmit that portion of their proposal within a specific time. And that is then reevaluated. Following an award, many vendors will require a debriefing. So for some of them, it's process in their businesses, and others just want to know how they could have done better. And in that case, we will meet with them, provide them with their score, provide them with comments, and how they can improve for the next submission. They're not provided with any information from the other bidders. And quite often, our vendors are very, very happy with the information that they're provided. We also provide dispute resolution. Sometimes there are vendors that are not satisfied with the information provided during the debrief, and they would want to escalate that further. There is a stepped escalation that's included in our procurement policy that we provide to those vendors. And if they're not satisfied, they can move through to mediation or arbitration processes. In addition to the RFT and RFP, there's a number of other opportunities that we use in our day-to-day procurement. Some of those include a request for information where we have something that we need and we're not sure, we don't have enough information to make an informed decision or to put together an RFP or an RFT. And we'll go to market and ask folks for information, and that will allow any bidder or any interested party to send that information to us. There's a request for expression of interest. Again, if we're not sure if there's a bidder out there that can do what it is that we need done, we will issue an RFEI to sound the market and see if there are folks out there who can provide that service. And there's also an RFPQ, a request for pre-qualification. We use those quite often where we can go to market, for example, in a consulting service or something to that nature, to qualify bidders, do our due diligence, ensure they have the experience and the qualifications needed to do the work, and we put them on a bit of a roster, and then the secondary process to that would be to request a quote for them, so we kind of shorten the process somewhat. And on that note, I'll turn you over to Zara Walpole, our Director of Legal Services.
Good morning. So I wanted to start out by saying I get how frustrating it can be when dealing with procurement, and it's so technical, kind of boring, and there's all these policies and processes, and it's really, really important, and it keeps us out of so much trouble when we do follow best practices, which the county does. And I'll start by saying when I first joined here, there was some software, legal services software that we were looking at, looked fantastic. The price was really pretty reasonable. So we were going to go ahead and get it. It was well below the numbers we needed. And so procurement said, that's great. Here's your contact. Here's your questionnaire. We'll send it over to IT. And I was like, what? And we filled it out, and it was fantastic software. It was 5 times as expensive as what the initial quote was that had been provided to us. And I was like, okay, that was actually a really useful process they just made me go through because I like the software. I don't like it that much. So that's just by way of background. So I want to talk a little bit about the Bellamy report. And unfortunately, the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry, which has happened 20 years later and had a lot of the same things to say. So the Bellamy report, I'm not sure who's familiar with this. This was when Toronto was going through the amalgamation, so June 2001, and serious questions were raised about 6 large transactions between the City of Toronto and outside suppliers of information technology services and equipment. So this was the amalgamation, and so they're trying to consolidate all of the IT services across the city. A year later, public inquiry. And on September 12, 2005, their Honorable Madam Justice Denise E. Bellamy, which is why it's called the Bellamy Report, delivered a report with recommendations covering both the Toronto Computer Leasing Inquiry and the Toronto External Contracts Inquiry. She made 241 recommendations, which have been adopted as best practices across many public organizations, including ourselves. So there were issues with conflict of interest. There were issues with poor procurement. It was extensive. Fast forward to 2010, 2014 in Collingwood, and I don't know how many people here are familiar with it. I have a copy of the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry. It reads like a novel, a 900-page novel, but I actually strongly recommend that everyone take a look at least at the executive summary and recommendations. So 2 transactions were being analyzed. One involved the construction of recreation facilities in which the usual procurement processes were bypassed in the name of fiscal responsibility. So there was no bad faith. The people involved thought they were doing the best thing, the usual process. It was taking too long. They had the perfect solution, and they barreled forward. And I think if you talk to people in Collingwood, they'll tell you it was not the perfect solution. Anyway, so as a result, the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry, at a cost of $8 million, concluded that undisclosed conflicts, unfair procurements, and lack of transparency stained both transactions, leading to fair and troubling concerns for the public. And again, 306 recommendations were made, many of them the same as those that were provided in the Bellamy report. Just in terms of procurement, there was a lot that was said about conflict of interest. You've probably heard a lot about that. But in terms of the role of council in procurements, the job of council is to set the direction of the corporation through the approval of the annual budget, which authorizes staff to proceed with the expenditures within the budget. It's also their role to establish fair, transparent, and objective procurement processes structured so that they are and clearly appear to be completely free from political influence and interference. So that would be the procurement bylaw, which was passed by previous council. That's a document that gets updated every 5 or 10 years. When was the last time? 2021? It was fairly recent. Yes. Oh, 3 years. Then it is also to remain arm's length from staff and vendors through the actual procurement processes, and to refrain from or declare any lobbying efforts experienced, and to avoid and identify conflicts of interest. So there's a separation. Council sets the direction, sets the budget, sets the processes, and then staff implement them on behalf of council. And just a quick note, if you do receive vendor inquiries, and chances are very good that you will, coming out of the Bellamy report and agreed to in the Collingwood report, councillors who receive inquiries from vendors related to any planned, current, or completed county procurement should direct vendors to county procurement staff or the contact information in the bid document. A quick note about MFIPA. This is the Municipal Freedom of Information Protection and Privacy Act, so we're always concerned about that. So we've got competing obligations, which is one is to ensure that people have access to their information, so they have a right to know what information we've collected about them, but also to protect information. And in procurements, the big one that we tend to be concerned about is Section 10.1, which says that a head shall refuse to disclose a record that reveals a trade secret or scientific, technical, commercial, financial, or labor relations information supplied in confidence implicitly or explicitly if the disclosure could reasonably expected to prejudice their competitive position, result in similar information no longer being supplied to the institution, result in undue loss or gain. So information that's provided to us as part of a procurement is generally provided to us under that exemption. I'm actually going to hand CETA over to Catherine, because you are more of an expert on that than I am.
CETA is the new Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, and it falls in line, well, the CFTA falls in line with CETA as well, and it has a number of requirements that govern our procurement processes, including advising the province, or I should say advising the federal government where we actually post our opportunities. In addition to that, under information disclosure, it does address, including its procuring entities, shall not provide any particular supplier information that might prejudice fair competition. So that's where in the RFP process, when we're doing a debrief, we do not provide the competitor's pricing on an RFP. That's just not something that we can do under CETA. And we can't do anything that would impede fair competition between suppliers and would prejudice the legitimate commercial interest of another. It only comes into play when we're dealing with projects that exceed $365,000 in goods and services and over $9 million in construction. Otherwise, we're subject to CFTA, which also has very, very similar text. I'll continue if you like. So following budget approval and successful procurement processes, reporting to council on procurement activity is an exception that occurs when there's a procurement that's not in the approved budget, because again, the approved budget is what gives our staff the authority. Where council input is required, but not impacting the award decision. Where a procurement may have a significant political impact, you'll see those as well. Emergency procurements determined to be monetarily material by our finance team. Procurements that are projected to exceed the allowable budget, and potential litigations regarding procurement. There are two types of reports, of course, the public versus confidential, and in the public, procurement details are permitted as per MFIPA and CFTA and all the various trade agreements. However, when we are including financial information for your consideration or proprietary information or anything regarding litigation or where negotiation direction is being sought, that would come to you under a confidential report. Please remember, members of council, of course, can always request to see detailed pricing outside of the public meetings. And that's it for our presentation.
Thank you. So thank you all. In summary, and before we get to questions, I did just want to say that although the procurement process can be described as boring or dry, we are very passionate about the process. You have staff who care deeply about making sure that the public and everyone is getting best value out of the process. You're welcome to contact us anytime, as are your staff, for questions and support. And we work with your staff at your home municipalities, and we learn a lot from each other in the process. So you can feel comfortable and comforted that you have a strong process with regard to procurement. And again, I'll hand it over to you for questions, but anytime, please just give us a call. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Councillor Dolan.
Thank you, Chair Cox. I would say that the Bellamy report is far from boring. If you ever want to read a spicy novel, it's a good place to go. Two questions. First is probably the most common question that elected officials get is when someone's not successful in a procurement and they say, well, wait a second, I'm the local guy and you hired the big bad guy from Toronto. Can you just speak to that?
Yes, I can. I mentioned the Discriminatory Business Practices Act that is one of the overarching rules that we need to abide by. And it basically says that we cannot discriminate based on a person's geographic location. And that's in the positive, discriminating towards a local or a person who is bidding from outside of the county. There are a number of implications of doing that. But mainly we're out to obtain a contract that gets best value for the corporation. And that may be through someone who's coming from the city. Our job is to make sure we analyze all the details, including the price, and the extra prices that may come up through travel, for example, and in the end, define what is the best contract for the county. That is really, in summary, what we need to do. And in some cases where location is key to the contract, for example, after-hours service, then the local vendor is obviously the best person positioned to do that. But where there aren't any implications of them being distant, then we must look at them as a fair prospect.
Okay, Councillor Ledoux.
Thank you. One follow-up, if I could. So if we have a successful bidder, met all got good references, and the work is extremely subpar from that contractor, is there an opportunity to blacklist or red flag? And also, if we can do that, do we provide that information also to the local municipalities?
Thank you for the question, and through the chair. We do have language in all of our RFP and T documents when it comes to providing references. A bidder, if they have worked for the county before, they must provide a county reference. So if the reference is not good internally, then that reference counts towards the award. So that has been a very effective way for us to eliminate poor performers from coming back. We, at this time, do not share that information with the local municipalities, I will say. However, we certainly can. And that's a really great point, and we would be happy to do that through a process with your staff. That's a great idea and would probably eliminate some pain potentially for everyone involved. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Ledoux.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to Ms. Hipwell. Great presentation, appreciate it, and great question, Councillor Dolan, for that. It's good to share that information. These contracts, we might not want to bid on our contracts. My question is in regards to green procurement. Is the county looking to move towards that and add that to your procurement policy? I know in Bradford we're starting to move towards that. We want to look at green procurement as an opportunity because climate change is the real issue. So I'm hoping that if the county's moving that we could gather the information together, because I know the City of Vancouver has a green procurement policy. So I was looking to see if your department is looking that way also. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And through the chair, we have had a green procurement chapter within our procurement policy for many years. And the environment has been top of mind at the county for procurement for many, many years. When it comes to moving forward, and over time, I'll just a little bit of history. With regard to RFPs, we have a scoring matrix that can get quite detailed. And over the years, as you all know, accessibility, health and safety, these are things that are very important to us when dealing with vendors. We need to make sure those policies are in place. And so we have developed the matrix to consider, where applicable, other aspects like fuel efficiency when it comes to vehicles. So it's not just about price, it's making sure the fuel efficiency is there, and we score that item, and it's a green component. We're moving forward to enhance the documents even further to be sure that we're considering upstream and downstream environmental good works, whether it's making sure you have a policy on dealing with your waste effectively, your oils if it's a vehicle procurement, or your waste in general, and also in terms of a presentation that I'm hoping to do in April, your climate action policies, so that those types of things are considered when we award a contract overall. So we as the public sector have led the way, I think, in terms of making sure the vendors are incented to enhance their operations and do meet accessibility policies, for example, and now moving into green procurement to consider the environment more highly in their operations. So hopefully that answers the question.
Councillor Bell, then Councillor Fryer.
Great. First, I'd like to say thanks for the presentation. It's very well done. Over the years, I've completed many tenders for different levels of government and for the county, and they're always very well written. They're really nicely broken down, give you your point of value. With the RFP, you said that it's a little different than the RFT because you get away, you allow for more technical. Has that changed? Because even though in the past I've noticed that your technical is still valued at less than what your pricing is, so you're still really driving for that lower price, which we know isn't always, the best solution.
Thank you for the question. It's true that in an RFP there are the technical considerations and then there's everything else. And with an RFP, and Catherine can speak maybe a little more to this, but when we, the procurement staff, work with our internal client on defining the scoring criteria and the weighting and the scoring percentages to that fact, we always remind them that they're doing an RFP and therefore price is not the primary factor. And so I would say that 99% or more of our RFPs, the weighting is not on price. So up to 49% can be, but there should never be an RFP where price is the overarching decision maker. So depending on the issue, it's up to the clients to let us know, and we would, debate with them the true value of what they're trying to get at. And then in the end, that is the document that would be published with regard to the scoring. And the scoring, I should say, is always public. It's always public. The bidders need to know how they're being scored. So that's always included.
Thank you. Councillor Fryer.
Thank you, Chair. And not questions for staff. What you've explained is a very solid process here at the county. And I do want to reflect on the Collingwood inquiry, though. As you noted, it had to do with bypassing rules and overstepping of rules by councillors. So there's that aspect of it. But as we're talking about procurement here, we had a budget presented to the public that said 1.4 to 1.6 million that ended up being over 10 million. I know you noted the 8, but there was other internal charges that ended up going against other ways, and staff time wasn't recorded. So you've got the issue of challenges with that procurement of those projects, and then you turn around and you've told the public it's going to cost between 1.4 and 1.6, and it turns out to be over 10 million. So you say to yourself, well, what happens with procurement during that process? And one of the things that this council at Collingwood is going to be doing is looking at lessons learned in that regard, and considering possibly bringing some recommendations forward out of that, because things like cost sensitivity analysis that wasn't done, those should be requirements. We know that nobody wants to go through a municipal inquiry, but we know they have the ability to call it. I think it's important that you do everything you can to protect the public when you're making that call. And as I said, we're going to be considering some of that and making recommendations for our own municipality, and we'll certainly share those with the other municipalities as we go forward. The latest inquiry, of course, has been the Red Hill Parkway in Hamilton. The initial budget that they put forward to the public was between $1 and $11 million. The last count I saw was $21 million. So all I'm saying is I think there's lessons to be learned as well about the procurement of an inquiry through the process, and maybe that's one of the benefits we can find out of it. But I just wanted to reflect on that, and thank you again for your presentation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Measures, then Councillor Anderson.
Thank you very much, Chair Cox. I just wanted to ask about preferred vendors and actually the purchasing of media buys, whether they be local media buys or regional, perhaps national media buys, and how those are scored. You talked about the scoring system, and how does the staff sit down and score that out, and how we make those determinations about those type of media buys?
Thank you for the question, through the chair. So with regard to the term preferred vendors, we do prefer the term approved vendors versus preferred. And an approved vendor is defined as a vendor we've used successfully in the past, and we could direct work back to them if we needed to within the range of the rules. So just to clarify that, we do have approved vendors, and we do certainly utilize them. When it comes to media buys, I'm not the expert on the specifics with regard to how to score or evaluate media buys. However, we in procurement would get that feedback from our clients, and we would design an evaluation criteria that would meet the needs, and then we would weight the various factors and, you know, common sense in terms of reference success in the past, those types of things. I don't think there would be anything, you know, extraordinary about that, but we can certainly provide that detail if you'd like. If we've done a media buy RFP in the past, if you're looking for an example of an evaluation criteria, we could certainly provide that.
Okay, if I can follow up, Chair, I'll just give you a comment then, and to the staff. Certainly, the critters in the garbage cans is a well-known media buy that's created a bit of identity for Simcoe and Simcoe Waste Management Services, and I think that it's frankly a good example of applying messaging to the public of the services provided by the county. I just want to suggest that while it's a great program, that there's perhaps national and programs that could be adopting some of those ideals, not just here in the beautiful county, but in across the country. And I'm hoping that perhaps our communications team are sharing that kind of information with our neighbors.
Well, thank you for the comments, and I see Ms. Deneen is sitting in the gallery. I'm sure she will take that back to our communications team. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson, then Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you. Through the chair, just a quick question with regards to procurement for our member municipalities. I know there's large capital purchases, i.e. tandem trucks and et cetera, that we can go through the county. Do we also look at the lower level, though? I'm thinking like fire departments with medical supplies and things like that. Is there a process to go through with the county so that we can have economies of scale with regards to those purchases?
Thank you for the question through the chair. Yes, so we, you may not be aware yet, but there is the Georgian Bay Public Procurement Cooperative, which all of us, including other public entities like hospitals, the casino, in fact, and other, the school board, other public entities within the county of Simcoe have the option to belong to and have a rep sit on that cooperative. Within that cooperative, there are many contracts that exist that all of us use, and I'll use paper as an example, or cleaning out drains in parking lots, or window washing. These are all things that we all use, and we can utilize the global buy to get a better cost on those contracts and join up through the piggyback clause, I'll call it. We all have access to that, and we can provide information on that to you if you wish to take back to your staff. But most of you, I would suggest, are on that board. In terms of, I'm sorry, the second part of your question? Okay, so there's that opportunity. I would also just say that we are here at all times to assist and certainly take any calls from your staff. We do have a number of connection points in terms of sustainable operations as well. We have most of you with staff on our sustainable operations working group, and procurement does come up in that working group as well.
Thank you. Councillor Hanlon?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I just also, as Mayor in Collingwood, couldn't let a minute go by without sharing some of what my takeaways from our inquiry and some thoughts for the members here in their own municipality. I think, one thing that's dawned on me over the years is that where the public is spending a lot of money to buy things or to sell things, it's always open to, I'll say unscrupulous people to take advantage and see if there's some way they can participate in the monies that are being going back and forth. And I think that's what we saw in Toronto with the Bellamy Commission, and, because the city was buying a lot of computer equipment. And in our own community, we were selling a public utility, and we were buying structures to put over recreation facilities. So the report that we had from our judicial inquiry gave us hundreds of recommendations. Some were for the province, and we've asked them to implement it because it has to do with provincial legislation. I would say they haven't done anything so far, but there were also hundreds of recommendations for our own municipality to do, and we have done virtually all of them. And for those who are interested in that kind of thing, I know our staff would be pleased to share. We have a very robust procurement policy. We have a manager of accountability, procurement, and risk management. We have several staff involved in procurement. We have a lobbyist registry. We have a staff council relations policy. We have a staff conflict of interest policy, just to give you a flavor. So, but I'm at the, I now think we've plugged enough holes that this can't happen again. There's, when someone's determined, I guess, it's more difficult, but I would like to just say again, if there's any interest in people having their staff look at what we've done, more than happy to share, and people can reach out to me for sure. The last thing I wanted to mention as one takeaway I had from this was, and our councillor here, who's our deputy mayor in Collingwood, mentioned it, which was the cost of the inquiry. And sometimes the municipality has no option but to say, how are we going to figure out what happened here? So that leads to these inquiries. However, how do you control the cost? And the problem I realized is that under the provincial equivalent, which is the Public Inquiries Act, the province can hold inquiries too, and you've probably noticed them over the years. But they amended their legislation several years ago to say they could put a budget on it. Okay, so a cap on how much is spent. But they never took the identical sections in the Municipal Act, which is what governs when a municipality wants to call an judicial inquiry, to say to allow municipalities to put a budget. And once you start an inquiry as a municipality, you can't interfere. You can't say to the judge, oh, please don't look at that or don't look at this, for obvious reasons. So as, member Fryer indicated, our estimate went from 1 million about to, well, I thought it was 8 million, but in any event, way too much. So I'm going to, just to say, I'm going to speak offline to maybe senior staff here, and because I would love to encourage the county to write the province, if this was the will of this House, to encourage the province to amend the Municipal Act to allow budgets if municipalities are in a position where they're facing the need for an inquiry. So thank you for that time.
Thank you very much. CEO Aiken?
One that's a valid point, and I think we should follow up on that as well. But I just really wanted to make a comment. First, Council, thanks for your time and your questions and the engaging discussion. This is a pretty critical part of municipal operations, particularly when you get into the complexities of the services that we provide at a regional level with our counterparts across the province. And the comment, I guess, to that end is I do sit with the Eastern and Western Ontario caucus CAOs, and I sit with the regional single-tier CAOs group, which makes up the regional governments in the large cities, Ottawa, Toronto, and Hamilton. And I can tell you the number of times that they've come to me and commented on the quality of our procurement policy and processes as kind of the gold standard of municipal procurement. But not only that, the willingness of Ms. Hipwell and Ms. Payne and their staff to assist other municipalities in mirroring our success has been outstanding. So thank you, Don, Catherine, and Zara, and your team. It's been really nice to hear, and I can tell you that much appreciated by my peers across the province.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Don, and your staff for doing such a wonderful job.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now we'll move on to 26.1, the Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee. I am a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Bell, second by Councillor Cabral. Recommendation that the recommendation contained within the Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee report dated March 2nd, 2023 be approved with the exception of the Township of Tay recommendation. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. 26.2, Councillor Education Session, March 28th, 2023.
I think that's me, Judith.
Oh, that's you. You just carried on then, sorry. I didn't bring my thing, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Councillor.
Sorry.
Normally I'd break now, but you know what? We're in the home stretch, only a handful of motions. I can't see anybody pulling the committee of the whole items, so we will go through. The motion I have is that council hold a meeting closed to the public in accordance with section 239 3.1 of the Municipal Act for the purposes of educating its members on their responsibilities under the Municipal Act and further information on various county programs and services. This meeting will be held here at the County Administration Centre at 1110 Highway 12 Midhurst, Ontario, starting at 9 a.m. March 28, 2023. So can I have a mover for that? Councillor McDonald, second by Councillor McKellen. Any questions on that workshop? It's coming up in 2 weeks. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. I have no closed meetings, so I'll look for a motion now to rise and report from our Committee of the Whole. Moved by Councillor Measures, second by Councillor Anderson. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. You ready? We're ready already. So Councillor Cox.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Smith, that the performance management recommendations contained within the Committee of Whole report dated March 14th, 2023 be approved. Questions? I would make sure I had to ask that.
All in favor?
All in favor? Carried.
Chairman Leduc.
Thank you, Warden. This is 29.2, Committee of Whole, Human Resources. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Walker. Any items to be pulled? Seeing none, the recommendation is that the Human Services recommendation contained within the Committee of Whole report dated March 14, 2023 be approved. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Back to you, Warden.
Thank you. And Chairman Dolan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Could I have a seconder, please, for the motion? Councillor Snell. So moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Snell, that the corporate services recommendations contained within the Committee of the Whole report dated March 14th, 2023 be approved with the exception of the delegated authority item.
Any questions on that? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So now consideration of the bills. Councillor Norcross, I believe you have those.
Thank you, Warden. Through you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Greenlaw, the bills number 7000-23, 7001-23, 7002-23, and 7003-23 be enacted as bylaws of the County of Simcoe.
Any questions on the bylaws? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Under announcements, I actually have a few. The first one, April 11th Economic Development Subcommittee meeting will be canceled. A County Council education session will be planned on April 11th, immediately following the Committee of the Whole. Now, the one on today, folks, still watches there. That one's on, but April 11th will be canceled. And unfortunately, due to our virtual meeting on the 28th of February, we were going to have a waste management. We were going to host a media announcement out in our foyer and have a picture op, and unfortunately that got canceled. So in February, in case anybody's not aware, county surpassed 200,000 tons of organics collected from households and businesses since our organics program began in 2008. While that's an impressive total, it's really important that we recognize that we have saved 4 years of land space. And it's also the reduction in our emissions is to the tune of 4,000 cars off the road every year. This is a tremendous accomplishment, and we want to thank all the residents as well as the council for making this happen. To celebrate 200,000 tons of organics collected, staff launched a PR campaign at the end of February and continue to promote the success. And immediately following the meeting today, please join me out in the atrium and we will have a photo op to celebrate that. You know, I can remember back to 2008 on some rather heated, let's say, debates over heading down this road. And Councillor Cox, I believe you were on council back then. Was there anybody else in the house here? Mikey, were you here then? Or? No, geez, I really am one of the old guys, eh? But no matter, it's been an achievement by every council since that time, because I guarantee even before the end of this term, there's going to be a hearty debate on waste management. It's something that we're all interested in. It's something we can all take credit for, our diversion, and it's something we can all be proud of. And going forward, we're going to keep moving forward, and I know this council will do the same. GM Elliott, anything you want to add to that?
Thank you, Your Worship, but just to the members of the House, by all means, we want to recognize the efforts of the residents and yourselves for making the needed investments to achieve that great milestone. We remain amongst the highest, second in terms of diversion rates in the province, and that's definitely attributable to the great work of our residents and you as our elected officials. We also recognize, though, we've got much work ahead of us. Of the waste that goes to landfill, the greatest opportunity to divert more is in the organics program. So we will be back with more plans and options for council to consider to help extend the life of our landfill even further. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other announcements and inquiries today? Councillor Snell.
Thank you, Warden. Through you to the table, on behalf of Mayor Smith and myself, I'm pleased to bring forward the invitation for you and a guest to attend a very powerful event being held in our community next Wednesday, March 22nd from 7 to 9 p.m. We're hosting Carol Todd, the mother of Amanda Todd, who in 2012, at the tender age of 15, made international news after her posted video exposing her sexploitation experience went viral. The video is a heartbreaking and raw reflection of a devastating impact of online exploitation and bullying. Sadly, a very short time after, Amanda Todd took her life. Carol has focused the past 10 years in keeping Amanda's legacy alive by becoming one of the most sought-after international speakers about online safety and exploitation awareness. Separate from 7 student and faculty training sessions led by Ms. Todd in our local schools in partnership with the Simcoe County District School Board, the town will also be hosting an unprecedented panel discussion about online exploitation, prevention, and youth mental health and wellness. This event is geared towards parents and caregivers 18 years of age plus. With Ms. Todd being the keynote, the panel will also include Dr. Meter, the Director of Waypoint Mental Health Centre, PC Christine Deneen from the Ontario Provincial Police, and the moderator for the discussion will be the Director of New Path Youth and Family Services, Brandy Saunders. The evening will be a frank discussion about online bullying and sexploitation prevention, as well as youth mental health awareness and wellness. Attendees can expect to discover the current digital exposures that our youth are facing and will be empowered with resources and action steps to keep our kids safe online. We are grateful to the community business sponsors that have allowed this event to be free to the attendees. As we all know, this is an issue that is a challenge for all of our communities, and Mayor Smith and I welcome you and a guest to attend, and a formal invitation from staff is forthcoming. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that announcement. Any other announcements? Go ahead, Councillor Gordon.
Thank you very much. This kind of goes along with the same line. I mean, we're right in the middle of our It Starts campaign, and Midland, I mean, this is just difficult to even talk about. I can't imagine this is still happening these days. At our Midland Public Library, we're hosting yet again an event called Drag Queen Storytime. And it's closing out the March break, supporting the 2S LGBTQIA, so I have to read this to make sure I don't miss anything, with a plus at the end, community, with a family-friendly event. And this truly is it's a story time, literally with kids, read by somebody dressed in drag. This rubs some people really the wrong way, and I can't believe, since sharing this on our social media in town, the vitriol that has come into my inbox and in my personal messages on social media. I'm quite active on social media. So I took some time to think about the kind of critique that was coming our way for hosting this, even though it's that library, it's deemed to be the municipality. And I've put some words together that I've shared online that have, again, caused a bit of blowback. And I wanted to repeat those in this House because I don't think that our library is uniquely going to be targeted for hosting events like this with inclusion. And it's kind of sad. So I just wanted to share the words that I posted online, and that while this event is not new to Midland, it has drawn some controversy in the past, and I provide a link to a CBC article that speaks to that controversy, as well as protests. And I just want to take the time to remind everyone that Midland is an inclusive, welcoming, and hate-free community. Intolerance and discrimination have no place in our community. This event and our library are deemed to be safe spaces where all are welcome. Opposing views and the right to voice them peacefully are protected rights in Canada, where freedom of choice underpins our democracy and faith systems. If this event bothers anyone in our community, feel free to exercise your right not to attend. However, I'd expect that you allow others the very same right, free from hate, divisiveness, intolerance, fear of persecution, or shame. I will be at this event if anyone wants to discuss this position with me in person. And a couple of people that have threatened to stage protests have reached out to me, and I've invited them to come and meet me in my office this Wednesday, where we can talk about some of their concerns. But it's a sad reality. I don't know if any other members in this House are hosting similar events in their communities, or if you've been subject to some of these, complaints and threats of protest. But if you do, I'd like to see us stand in solidarity for inclusivity, especially in a month where the county is hosting the It Starts. So for what it's worth, I just wanted to share that in this House with the people that follow along. And I'm sure that we could easily take this statement, insert other municipalities' name into it, and we'd stand together. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And well said. Are there any other announcements? So with that, I'll go to Councillor Norcross for the confirmatory.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Burkett, that Bill number 7004-23 be enacted as a bylaw of the County of Simcoe.
Thank you. Everybody's heard the motion. All in favor? That is carried. And now I have a motion to adjourn that the March 14th, 2023 meeting of County Council be adjourned at 10:45. Moved by alternate Councillor Sander, second by Councillor Fryer. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you, and I'll see you in the atrium. Oh, I'll get it.
Yeah, staff will send it